ready? Start things off, and I think you can just start going and doing some introductions around the room. Harry Waisbren. I moved from Wisconsin to New York just last August. Got very active in the Wisconsin uprising in terms of having solidarity rallies for Wisconsin here in New York. And what's amazing is in Wisconsin, they very legitimately think New York is the top state in solidarity with them. And to that point, I want to also begin by giving credit to Arlene with Move On and Josh with DFNYC, who've been fantastic in terms of having their organizations take part in really great rallies that we've been doing for Wisconsin as well throughout. And I'd also emphasize that people are watching and paying attention, close attention to Occupy Wall Street in Wisconsin as it's looked at as an extension from pretty much everything that we're doing. The problem that we see at this point, though, is that not enough people are talking about this as an extension of it. The uprising is, in a lot of ways, that the state capital occupation is looked at as something that is over and that it's only transitioned to the recalls. But people don't know the fact that a lot of these, not only sentiments, but the very tactics that were used then have been and are being continued. This is most evident in two actions that we'll be talking about today and how we could further replicate not only New York but nationwide, called the Solidarity Sing-Along and then the Paul Ryan Sit-In that happened in, both happened in Wisconsin, or have been happening in Wisconsin. Before we get there though, I think if we just did introductions around the room, I get people to talk about just who brought them here, or what they know about Wisconsin Uprising, and any connection that they have to Occupy Wall Street that they want to share with it. So yeah, just want to, John?
I guess I'll start. My name's John Greaves. I work with Brad right there. We have a media production company, and we, on our spare time or when we're not trying to get paid, we try and push political causes that we feel sympathetic towards. And I came here because, you know, the uprising of the movement in Wisconsin was inspiring to me, and me and Brad tried to do a couple things. We met Harry, and it's been something that for us seems like one of the first times, you know, in a long time that people actually stood up, and it's probably the precursor of like the beginning of what's happened with Occupy Wall Street, and hopefully some real change that will happen in the future.
My name's Carol, aka Cheddar. Some of you saw me yesterday. Well, hopefully we're friends on Twitter. Long time. I've been an activist, but never an activist on this level. I'm born and raised in Wisconsin. I hail from a small dairy town in the middle of Wisconsin, and now I live in Madison. Madison's only 250,000 people. I don't know how many. We only have 5.5 million in the state. It's a pretty rural state. So I guess I'm here to I like to meet people in flesh who I'm convening with. I want to connect with Occupy people. I want to keep us inspired. I want to let the Tea Party operatives who will be watching this live stream, I don't think they're on yet, know that they are finished. So I'll repeat that message later. That's it for now.
My name is Terry Marshall. I've been involved with Occupy Wall Street. Been going down since day one. I've been in different working groups, the People of Color working group and the press team. And I'm also one of the co-founders of Occupy Comics, which is a comic book that's telling the stories of 99%. We just published our first comic, so we find it. Hopefully, I have print copies tomorrow. People won't be here, but I'll find you. And yeah, Wisconsin, I just know about from what I've seen on TV from the occupation of the Capitol building, and I always want to find out more and connect with people on the ground there. I do think that is at least one of the beginning things that for the American uprising of this year. That one of the things that led to Occupy Wall Street, I do believe, is the occupation of the Wisconsin Capitol. So definitely want to connect with the movement there more, and that's why I came to.
If I can interrupt you, is everyone okay if we videotape?
So I'm Arlene Geiger. I've been active for decades, but most recently I'm the council organizer of the Upper West Side Council of Move On. And we had been doing a lot of activities prior to Wisconsin, but nothing ever got a lot of, really a lot of media, even, huge numbers of people, and just go on and on and on. And all of a sudden Wisconsin it was, Egypt and then Wisconsin, it was like unbelievable that this could happen in our country. It felt like the beginning of a movement began, something that I, felt back in the 60s and the early 70s. There was a movement, not just organizations doing things, and it looked like this was happening again. So in any case, Move On had, together with the Jobs Party and connected up with some unions, organized a huge rally, which was really quite sizable, City Hall Park. And then another one shortly after that, and then it seemed to me like things were just quelling down, and I thought, this felt like there was something really bubbling up, and now it's gone. And, honestly, Occupy Wall Street was surprised. It was really a shock that finally things bubbled up from the bottom up. I've been sort of involved, but not, really essentially involved in Occupy Wall Street, just supporting stuff. So I really want to connect up with people who have been active in Occupy Wall Street and working groups, been really involved in that and involved in Wisconsin, and just connect, learn and connect. Yeah.
I'm Jenni Dye. I'm here from Wisconsin. I'm an attorney in the Madison area. I've been really involved in the on-the-ground protests, the Capitol occupation, and then several renditions of what we called Walkerville, where we were sleeping outside the Capitol this winter, and then again over the summer during the budget protests, as well as the solidarities that go on that Harry has mentioned, which I've been able to go to more frequently because I switched jobs during all of this to have more time to devote to it. And just really looking forward to the chance to talk to you guys about everything that you've been doing here. I came out in early October to spend some time at Occupy Wall Street, and then also went to Occupy Boston after that before going back to Wisconsin. So thanks for having us.
I'm Aaron. I live in Connecticut. I'm the chair of local DFA chapter there, Democracy for America. I'm also part of the Move On Regional Council. I'm one of the facilitators for Occupy New Haven, which is one of the few occupies, I guess, that hasn't been cleared out so far. You can follow me on Twitter at DFA New Haven.
I'm Sari Burns. I'm kind of a little bit more peripherally involved with the movement, but I've been to a bunch of protests and been meeting more and more people from Wisconsin and seeing how the movement's been growing from watching it from the beginning. So I was interested in learning more.
Carol Brown. I'm not officially with any of the working groups or anything, but I go to Occupy Wall Street a lot. I'm like one of the people who was up front holding the sign so that all the tourists would take my picture and they'd all ask questions and stuff. I'm kind of, if you're not with one actual particular little group, then you could say you're a free agent. Heard of Wisconsin, read lots about it, the connection. And right now I'm with Activist Nations. That's my friend's website, and he's taping. And he doesn't really like to focus on all the people in the audience, because sometimes they don't really like when you...
that's why I asked.
Yeah.
But is that a problem? It's just hard to capture the sound pointing in that direction.
Yeah. He left this microphone up front, because that's where usually the speakers are, and at the, turn the cameras to everyone around.
But is there, you or the other folks, I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but does anyone have an objection?
No.
Okay, all right.
Usually people do, so he usually just keeps the camera on the front.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to
I'm Nancy Kelly. I'm sorry I was late. I work for the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, and I'm a peripheral participant as a citizen in Occupy Wall Street.
My name's Sophie. I am a theater artist living here in New York, and have been going to GAs and marches and coming to this and looking to come to other working groups and trainings.
Hi, I'm Thomas Gallagher, and I was at a demo against the South Korea Free Trade Agreement, and the way that, just to make the connection, that's why I came here. There seemed to be a really strong connection for me about the way that this was pushed through in the parliament in South Korea, where it seemed that there was some 300 and some members of parliament, but only 160 voted for this, and only 12 voted against, and the rest of the parliamentarians are just not accounted for. And that seemed very much like Wisconsin. And so we were saying, you know, well, how was this redressed in Wisconsin? And how can this be redressed elsewhere? Because obviously the connection that was made, the reason I went to the South Korea thing was because if we ratify something in the States and then people have a chance to fight against it in their own country when it's a connection between us and them, that affects us. From those people, our solidarity with them helps us. And it felt very much like Wisconsin and the solidarity situation with Wisconsin. So I'm really curious to find out more about Wisconsin, to see how we can move these models all over the place.
I'm Phoebe, and I am starting to get more involved with Occupy Wall Street. I've started getting involved with outreach, with ComHub, and with hopefully Guerrilla and Odesk. And which, because we don't have I feel strongly that we need a place for people to go to like find out information about Occupy Wall Street, and it used to be in the park, and now people have nowhere to go. And so someone is starting to organize guerrilla tabling, and so I'm hoping that tables will start cropping up places with information, and we're still here, and this is how you get involved. And so we were riveted by what happened in Wisconsin and the occupation there, and that you guys were there overnight, and that, you know, to see changes happening, it was so inspiring. And so when we saw this group that we could have a dialogue with you, it just seemed like a perfect place to be. So welcome.
My name is Josh. I'm with Democracy for New York City. We're also a DFA group. What Harry was talking about, collaborating with the Job Party, with Wisconsin groups, is something that's, I think, a tremendous opportunity. Our group has been doing things around Occupy Wall Street. For instance, DFNYC and also a few other local progressive groups got together and just had a table at Occupy for a couple of months and gathered several thousand signatures for the millionaire's tax delivered to the governor. I just feel like there's so much opportunity for people to get involved, not just to come to, to congregate, but to really have serious direct action. And I'm excited to be here.
Great. And I think one particularly interesting aspect that we saw from around the room is one of the connections, the main connections, I think, between the models we saw in Wisconsin, not only Occupy Wall Street, but the occupation stemming from it, is having like a permanent system where people are able to get together and have something just individuals, person to person, able to make these plans about what to do next and have that community feel. And one of the very, very interesting things that we talked about a bit, and we'll get more into now, that's been going on in Wisconsin that people don't know, is that ever since the last March, when the protests were still big but getting smaller, there started this action they called the Solidarity Sing-Along, which basically was at 12 to 1, people's lunch breaks, hundreds of people come to the Capitol to sing anti-Walker songs, sing union songs, protest songs in the Capitol. And it's something they've done every day, every weekday since then. And what's amazing about it, and even if you look at the info pages, and long before there was an Occupy Wall Street, that description of why it's important is almost exactly what we've realized made Occupy Wall Street important. It's just people know that there's this one place they can get together and just make other plans, see their friends, and have this really fun action. So I think without further ado, Carol or Jenny, if you want to just describe what else has been going on with the Solidarity thing and how it got started and where it's at, I think it'd be great.
I totally don't care. I can give a brief update.
I'll give you just a little bit and then I'll let Jenny jump in. It started March 11th, and so I believe it was March 9th that we had the 6 p.m. rush. It's like rush vote where the Republicans jammed through Wisconsin Act 10 by, at first they said it was financial and they said it wasn't a financial bill. They just changed the rules so that they didn't need a quorum for the Senate, and this made people really angry. And they had rushed in, and then it got taken out. Anyway, having an occupation wasn't really, it was coming apart at the seams, and so being able to stand in the rotunda and sing for that hour a day was something to do. And it was a gentleman from Wisconsin Network for Peace and Justice, WNPJ. If you Google that, WNPJ started in like the early 90s. They're very they've been like anti-nuclear energy, pro-peace, anti-war, and obviously very progressive, largely democratically oriented, but not officially, like just independent. So they just like stepped in, printed up songbooks, labor songs, like traditional like Solidarity Forever. Which I remember at first I thought like that's kind of too nerdy for me, actually. I mean, it sounds like really judgmental, and I remember my son is 22, and I played some songs for him, and he's like, no one is going to like this. But it's been every single weekday, noon to 1, often on the weekend or a special event. 4:30 p.m. special sings for teachers so they can come after their jobs because they have some people just can't be there at that time. Now we've got a holiday songbook and all of the different lyrics of traditional carols and some from other cultures are changed. And the one that's really awesome is the 12 Days of Scott Walker, where you get to. And if I can get help on the net later, I'll bring that one up. So, and I can even sing it for you. Oh, you already have it up. Awesome. I'm happy to sing it, and you can enjoy it. And I'm going to be quiet and let you go on next.
Yeah, so that's kind of the background of how Solidarity Thing started. What's been going on most recently is that Scott Walker and his Department of Administration has proposed some new rules for access to and any sort of events that you want to hold at the Capitol. And one of those rules is that any group of 4 people or more has to have a permit if they're there to promote a cause. And another one of those rules was that any event that's held at the Capitol needs to be at 90 decibels or less. And so clearly people felt that these were targeted at the Solidarity thing, which is ongoing and has definitely gotten under the skin of some of the Republican legislators. On Friday, we were expecting to have kind of the first showdown. On Fridays, traditionally, a Solidarity thing is held outside because you're not allowed to bring musical instruments into the Capitol. And on Fridays, they actually have people come with their instruments and kind of have a pickup band. And so that went forward on Friday. And Friday morning, the Department of Administration released amendments to the new rules. So we're really dealing with a moving target. It's really hard to know what your rights are in Wisconsin at any given moment now. But in this case, what the amendments did was carved out an exception to the decibel level for the noon to 1 slot. I think, and this is just my opinion, in an attempt to avoid any real showdown with the Solidarity thing, which has said that they are going to continue regardless of the rules and will not be seeking a permit. So Monday, tomorrow, is going to be the first Solidarity thing that will be held inside the Capitol with the new rule that you need to have a permit if there's more than 4 people. Fortunately for our friends in the lobbying industry, they have carved out an exception. So if you are a lobbyist and you want to come in a group of 4 or more to promote a cause, that is okay. Also, if your family is more than 4 people, you can still attend. But if you're just individuals in a group of 4 or more, you better get your request for a permit in, apparently. So Solidarity Sing, in addition to kind of the free speech issues that are going on currently, has really been a way for us to keep a central meeting spot going, at least in Madison locally, without the actual occupation continuing. People tend to be free over the lunch hour. There are a lot of people who work in the downtown area where Capitol is located and are able to come. And so not only is it a way to continue to show our solidarity and our opposition to everything that's happening, it's a way to continue to be able to connect with people. And it's an ongoing, every day we know that you can be there and kind of both show your opposition, reconnect, and re-energize for continuing the fight. And those, I think, are really important aspects, whether it's a sing-along or some other event. Obviously, occupations have issues right now in the United States with sustainability because so many communities are experiencing police crackdowns and shutdowns on their occupations. But developing an event similar to Solidarity Sing-Along is something that I think is really beneficial because it does allow you to do something in a space where you're going to be able to meet in, during public hours, and allows people to reconnect and plan for the next phases, regardless of what's happening with those shutdowns. So, my suggestion, and I know I received some tweets yesterday when we talked about Solidarity Sing-Along, would be, whether you do a sing-along in New York or something else, it's a really beneficial thing and has been for us. And in New York, you guys have great possibilities with all of the people in the entertainment industry who are here, who might, be willing to participate in something like that.
And off of that, actually, so one of the variations of this early on, I don't think it was necessarily connected to Solidarity Sing-Along, but there was a Les Mis flash mob at the Capitol Rotunda, and anyway, people joined in, some people in costume. There was sort of a ragtag band that played, and they caught it from about 8 different angles. And this web page I'm referencing, by the way, is just Wisconsin stands with New York. .blogspot.com, and there's a bunch of different examples. But I try to give you one real quick, assuming we're wired for sound. I'm not sure. This is actually one of the outside Solidarity singers, and Arlo Guthrie, whose father wrote "This Land Is Your Land," was special lyrics you'll like. There you go. One of the quick selection is, actually, I don't know if you were there, the occasion was actually the day before, one of the protesters had been essentially assaulted by one of the former Republicans. Did you hear that story?
I wasn't there because at that point in time I was actually working out of town, but over the lunch hour there have been a few occasions where there have been members of the Tea Party who have come to the Solidarity Sing-Along to show their opposition to the Solidarity Sing-Along. And in this case, I believe it was actually a former state senator and one of his friends who were, aligned with the Republican Party. And the friend of this former state senator actually attacked one of the Solidarity singers, and I believe knocked his tooth out. And so the next day, of course, the Solidarity Sing was larger than ever as a show of support. There have also been times where the Tea Party has taken out a permit over the time that the Solidarity Sing-Along is traditionally there, and then they'll come and they'll stand along the rotunda with their "Don't Tread on Me" banners, which, quite frankly, is fine because what I'm saying is "Don't tread on me."
So let me just give you a little quoting Dr. King with the quotation that basically ends the meaning of all this is love. And now we are together with people.
Answer your question.
Yeah.
What when they talk about this 85 decibel thing, are these proposals that they're pushing, or are these things that they've already pushed through somehow?
They are rules that are being created by the Department of Administration. So because they are just rules for access to the Capitol building, they don't have to be pushed through the legislature or anything like that. To my knowledge, there wasn't public hearings about them. They did have informational sessions before they went into effect to allow people to come and ask questions. And right now we have a tree up in the Capitol because of the holiday season, and somebody had asked the question, what if I want to, come with my grandparents and show them the tree, but we're all there, viewing the tree for a specific purpose. And they said, if you came and your purpose was to say something like, God bless America, that would probably be okay. So I don't know what that means in terms of, what if you come and your purpose is, we don't think that our government should be calling it a Christmas tree, which is a decision that Scott Walker made this year. So if you bring 5 people to say, I want to view this tree, but I don't think it should be called that, then do you need a permit? I don't know.
So if it's not law, then what happens if you disobey it?
It is law. It's a rule for your behavior at the Capitol. So if you violate it, you can be removed from the Capitol by Capitol Police. If you are there without a permit and damages are incurred, the state can request that you have to pay for them. Another part of these new rules are that previously you had to apply for a permit in advance and potentially make advance payments in the amount of $50 per officer that the state determines is required to monitor you per hour.
What if you brought your own security?
The new rules that they've released actually do include a provision saying that they may not require you to have as many Capitol Police if you have a plan for your own marshaling and private security. So that is a possibility at this point. But it's really a barrier to free speech. And I think these are great examples of how what's happening in Wisconsin is not just about the union issues that it started out really hitting the news with. It's about the fight for democracy and the right to have a voice in our government.
I think that's a great segue also to this other action in addition to the solidarity saying I think is further a model that can be replicated that a group called Wisconsin Jobs Now instigated. What they did this past August during the recess is they really wanted to emphasize the lack of town halls and transparency that there was amongst a particular congressman named Paul Ryan, who I think has affected the entire nation. So what they did is they organized sit-ins in his occupations of his congressional offices in the state of unemployed constituents of his, who legally they were not able to kick out of a lot of the offices. They would go in and really similar to what we saw in the Capitol occupation, what we later saw with Occupy Wall Street, they used live streaming from iPhones to get footage from in the office of the people working the desks, even just being as rude as they could to these people, trying to kick them out. Like the whole issue, the police coming in, the police saying they won't remove them. It was incredible footage the whole time, and it caused Paul Ryan a lot of headaches. To the extent that there was big rallies going on outside of their outside of his offices, and then and further than that, even finally when Paul Ryan, if you recall, he did not have any free town halls, but he did have a town hall where you could pay $15, I think, to be able to go in. And they charged for the town hall to make it less likely for people who, well, frankly, just are less well off to get to, so that they would be less likely to make trouble. but they helped organize some guests for Paul Ryan, where they had a series of people, I think 15 people, would get up and make loud statements, and a bunch of them got arrested even. And there's just this fantastic video of this insurrection almost in Paul Ryan's town hall that Wisconsin Shop now organized. And I know that model of really taking it to the politicians and making sure they hear you is something I think that we all could learn from, and is also frankly very similar to what we just saw with the Occupy Congress effort in DC.
Yeah. A quick question on that I mean, essentially you have the police on your side, don't you? Because they are a union, because they came to support. We don't. So like, how does that dynamic work out? You won't.
I just want to correct one little thing that gets mixed up. The Madison Police Force is a little more on your side.
Okay.
The Capitol Police, the individuals that are police, and that's been a mix of state employees that are always there, and when we bring in DNR people, this is just some state guy with a gun to come in.
Okay.
They're not necessarily on your side, and
Okay.
we've had people thrown to the ground, thrown into the wall, thrown down in elevators, and reporters who were told you can come in and then arrested for being in. So it's been pretty capricious. It's nothing near what you guys have experienced on the streets of New York. So there's this the folks in the Capitol itself. That's state property. Once you get into the street and the sidewalk across, that's Madison. So that's, you see.
Right. Yeah.
So and then DOA is headed by Mike Hitch. Mike Hitch is a arrogant toad, and that gets on a live stream. Are we on live?
Yes.
Great. And that's just for me. Maybe that's for everyone from Wisconsin, but that's my opinion. And so then everyone who's under him has implemented more authoritarian, draconian policies. And then just want to briefly state that, because I feel like I have to, the late Ben Maisel is a constitutional activist and legalization of marijuana activist who passed away recently. And he has there's case law on the books where he has defeated the Department of Administration's interest in having us have permits within that building and on those state grounds. We only need a permit to have an amplification device. DOA is just ignoring case law and just implementing the policy. And now ACLU and other groups are going to be suing to go back to where we were. So,
I wasn't trying to commiserate or anything. I really wanted to find out, like, how do you get how do you get unionized police forces on the side if you're not specifically labor? I mean, in Wisconsin you have the issue, and
I think
so
it does take leadership. Brian Austin is one of the chief persons that's a spokesperson and a leader for the Madison, it's MPPA, Madison Professional Police Association. And he's had he's had remarkable experiences where, the folks that are off-duty cops are in. So he'll tell this story repeatedly, that the off-duty cops were in the rotunda with all these people, and these people came up to him and just thanked him profusely because they said, I know that because the off-duty police are here, we won't get, I feel more safe. Yeah. And, Madison is a stronger union town, maybe, than New York. Maybe there's a little more solidarity amongst different unions, that maybe your unions are not as connected. I'm not really sure if I can speak for New York, but they had a lot of solidarity with everybody just very quickly. And they've endured, that family has endured a lot. Every family that has had their name publicly associated, almost every, has had a harassment of some sort, whether it's death threats, online harassment, physical altercation. So you're not seeing that. We saw you get pepper sprayed, and someone from the media is there. In Wisconsin, it's very distributed, and you're just not seeing them like that, too. And there's some disagreement over whether we're supposed to promote or share that idea amongst different people. But for those individuals who are watching the live stream, who are Tea Party operatives from Wisconsin, it's coming out it is very difficult to destroy civilization and keep the veneer of being a civilized people. So we're seeing you for what you are. I'll be quiet, I'm getting ribs.
We just got a tweet from Steve Hansen, who's watching the live stream in Wisconsin. He's a blogger at uppitywist.org.
Uppitywist.org, right.
Uppitywist.org. He just gave a little addendum that note that the Union police supported Madison doesn't necessarily spread through the rest of the state. And I think it's also, Madison is a unique town in that regard. But I think Carol is right about this contrast between what happened at Occupy Wall Street in terms of the police harassment, like pepper spraying young women, arresting 700 people on the bridge, even though they didn't know they were necessarily in an arrestable situation. All these things along the line really blew it up that much more. And Wisconsin was different than that. I mean, for very good. But at the same point, and I think we're at this stage where so much of Occupy, the efforts have been instigating the police, trying to get these big arrests, seeing the harassment, have these painful videos of people getting very seriously hurt be the motivating factor to go do much more. And again, I think with the contrast what we see with the Midwestern nice mentality of Wisconsin, the fact that they're just going in and having these sing-alongs as it's the main way to participate is a big difference. And it's also a way for people that do not want to go into a situation where they could get pepper sprayed or hit in the head with a tear gas canister and brain damage. It's another way for them to participate. And I think we need to be inclusive enough to have people that aren't willing to be in a pretty literal war zone to take part.
Just a last brief point on that is that, I think in terms of motivation for the police officers to get involved, Walker himself set this up. He really, because he exempted the police and the fire unions, they took that as a challenge, and they decided they were going to stand in solidarity despite the fact that they were protected. And just really a stand of conscience. You mentioned across the street is a different matter, but both the Madison police chief and the Dane County sheriff also, as individuals, have really spoken up about the righteousness of the cause. And so, therefore, I think they're a mitigating force to have the police be allies, which is just so ironic and so wonderful.
The only thing that I would add to that is I can't speak to the specifics of how the police and the firefighters ended up there the first day and what discussions may have happened behind the scenes, but support or a more appropriate response from police in most protest situations doesn't just happen magically. There's really crisis teams that are working behind the scenes, and so having a really well-planned action and a crisis team who is negotiating with police to try to have their response happen in the most appropriate way possible, and have your activists on the ground prepared to either know who is willing to get arrested, know how to passively resist, and be ready for whatever that action and whatever the response form takes, I think is a really key component of that, whether you're in Wisconsin or you're here.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. I think that sometimes a misconception in New York is that to be involved with Occupy Wall Street or in any other, like Oakland or wherever you are where there's been heavy police violence, that to be involved you have to put yourself in that situation, and it's not true. Like, there's people, I just started volunteering in the Occupy Wall Street office, and there's people who I think are behind the scenes most of the time. Like, they aren't at the major protests, they're not on the front lines, or like when we go on the marches, we make sure, because like I have a job and Tom is freelance, so like my job is sort of, anyway, it's important that one of us has a stable job. Yeah. Not that you don't have a stable job, but I'm saying that's totally wrong, and I don't mean, anyway.
Go ahead.
Anyway, so like getting arrested is probably not a good idea for me, so we are pretty conscious that we stay really aware of where the police are, and we're not the ones climbing over the fence, we're not the ones in the front lines, we're not the ones taking the streets, so. But then you have to be careful as a cop.
One of the things that happened in Wisconsin, I think that guaranteed that folks knew that they had those choices, is that there were older activists of the Vietnam era, other folks that had experience with passive resistance and nonviolent techniques that gave workshops, and especially informed the young people and the families and the other folks, so that when push came to shove, when people were being made to choose about whether to stay in the capital or not. They made informed choices. Have there been parallels like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's major
Okay.
teach-ins before any I mean, I haven't been going to them because I'm not putting myself in the front lines, but yeah, there's a lot of preparation and.
I want to tack on one real quick note on the folks that are active in Vietnam. Madison was a chief place for Vietnam War protests in the nation. So
About 10% of those people were students from New York, by the way, because there are a lot of New Yorkers there at the time. But yeah.
So we've got those folks that are in WNPJ. And I just wanted to kind of add a little footnote to my comment before about the music being a bit nerdy. Okay, that music is rooted in the traditions of those people that were protesters in the 60s. They're still there. And Dane County at large is a bit white. The city of Madison has different areas that are more diverse racially. But basically a lot of white folks show up at this event for us. You'll notice at the Paul Ryan protest, they're more towards Milwaukee. You'll see a more diverse set of people. So, the answer to that, I just wanted to kind of say that now that the Solidarity Sing-Along has proceeded for, it's almost 250 sing-alongs, I see a greater diversity of people. I see greater age ranges. I went the other day and I saw folks that are in Occupy Madison that are in their 20s, and I see folks all the way up to the 80-year-olds, see the people with the babies. I just want to kind of insert that idea that I feel like when you hear the labor songs and the old traditional songs, like totally just don't stick with that. Like these songs could be totally different, and I'd like to see them be totally different in different cities.
So just briefly piggyback on what you're saying about diversity. Madison's roughly 20% now. When I first moved here 30 years ago, it was probably 10% people of color. And so like a lot of small Wisconsin towns that were totally homogenous are now 10 to 15% Black and Latino and other. So it's a lot of changes happening. So I take a little anyway. Just careful.
I know, but we don't see the racial diversity.
Well, let me. And part of the reason for that, I'm an organizer in South Madison, which is about 40% people of color, more low income. And I think what I've heard is. And you may hear this too, but to a certain extent, some of the folks who are longtime community organizers and communities of color, they have ambivalence about some of the white middle class folks who are there, because they've been at that same table for decades working on civil rights issues, and so there's a sort of presumptiveness to come to the table, and then they feel kind of pushed aside. Others really, revel in this. They say, hey, now you get it, you understand what I've been saying all these years, and so there's that part of it. Too, but one other really positive example is Madison and Wisconsin and Minnesota have a disproportionate number of Hmong immigrants, the tribal people of Laos, that became refugees after the Vietnam War. And what happened there is there was an organizing meeting where someone of middle generation called the elders together and the young people. I think on both sides of the generational divide there was a misunderstanding. So what is this all about? Why would this involve us? And what are the implications? And so there's some really good educational work that was very culturally specific that was done, but also involved with a group that wants to organize statewide, organize people of color, so that, the other issue that you all face too is we don't want to be singularly focused, and we want to embrace all different causes, including civil rights causes and other things. And so there's a group that's specifically coming together. And of course, that's linked to all the voter suppression techniques that are now, part of the landscape. So anyway, just to add to what you're saying, you're right. If you underwrite reality, we're a fairly homogenous place. If you saw the Capitol Square, it's a very different layout than what I saw at Ducote Park two months ago. But it's also, and that's somewhat reflective of the two different places. But we're working on it, and that's really important to the movement nationwide.
So you guys have incendiary publications like The Post that really create an artificial divide between people. I feel like that's such a factor here in terms of how people identify and their allegiances, and it really divides like the working class and all these different, and I just don't know what the landscape is there and how you've combated that.
I can talk too long, so I'll talk really briefly. Okay. Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, I believe, is still the state's most popular newspaper across all 72 counties. And then I think Wisconsin State Journal might be second.
Yeah.
And then we've got these regional newspapers like Wausau Daily Herald, Lacrosse Trib, and Appleton Crescent Post, and yada yada. We've got regional ABC, NBC, etc. Milwaukee Journal Sentinel has some great investigative reporting. It has some exemplary writers. And then its editorial board endorses Scott Walker and has been very toned up. Thank you, obnoxious. And sometimes they're very obvious in what they're trying to do, and sometimes they're very supple in their approach. And it's a bit more insidious than the Post, I think, and that will seem like more of a normal newspaper to people. So there are some newspapers that have shocked me. Appleton Post Crescent endorsed Joanne Hockenberg, who was, Appleton was the birthplace of, John Birch Society is there.
Joe McCarthy, yeah,
Joe McCarthy, born there, raised there. Wausau Daily Herald ran a story on the 84-year-old woman from Brokaw, she's going to be a plaintiff in a ACLU suit. So there's surprises. I'll start.
So anyway, I think it's both a tale of some of these publications are blatantly hostile, but as you said, other papers in medium-sized towns that are very conservative heritages have come in support of the recall efforts, which certainly have condemned the abuses of power and other things. So it's really kind of surprised us that those kind of changes could occur.
But you're getting at what seems to be a deliberate divisiveness.
Yeah.
With the Post. And I wouldn't say they're as obvious as the Post.
Yeah.
It's a bit more
well, and the other, right-wing talk radio is especially powerful in Milwaukee. There's a couple of hosts in Madison that also hold on sway. I used to be on what was the Air America affiliate as a radio show host, and just this goes back years, but it's not surprising. This is the national trending force. They actually in a Clear Channel station where we were the one progressive, they forced us, tried to force us off the air. The one thing that happened in Madison, just a brief tangent, is though that we got 5,000 people together and had a protest and convinced Clear Channel for the first time in history to change their mind. They kept the progressive format.
Can I ask you a question? When Madison was first, getting to get, the occupation of the state capitol and it was going on for months, what was the main means that people sort of publicized what was going on? If it wasn't, the talk radio that people listened to, and what was it? Was there social media? Was it the local magazines? Was it just, person to person, phone trees? I mean, how
it was, frankly. We went online, and there were news, when he dropped the bomb February 11th, there were news reports online, TV affiliates, protesters were right outside wherever he stood on that Friday. And then folks were on the phone with each other. Students from the UW Madison had already been planning a different thing. They got in cars, they drove to rural, Republican, even Republican, didn't matter, knocked on doors indiscriminately, no lists. They just started knocking, telling people what was happening. Unions got their email lists going. They got their phone trees going. We at the MKII got hot on Facebook. Everyone on Facebook was like, I've never seen such a thing. Just hit hard. Are you going? I'm going. Commitment, immediate. And Twitter was on fire. People were learning, struggling really quickly to learn how to expand, how to use some of this stuff. And you hear when you're protesting, someone would say, well, I'll Facebook you. I just learned how to do this because of this. From February 11th to about February 17th, it was the most, kind of the scariest time for me media-wise, just to not see, we didn't see it reflected though in any media. Ed Schultz of the Ed Schultz Show came to Madison in the evening, and I remember standing on the Capitol steps, and this woman turned to me, and she was crying and just talking to me about how she said, I will vow to walk through glass to cross that water. And I remember just crying because I don't really like Ed Schultz's style, really. He's got this real football, coach kind of style. I remember just being like, oh God, I love Ed Schultz, to be the head guy, because he was so, he felt so abandoned by the media. And then it began to pick up where bloggers were picking up, and those were just really kind of a rough 6 days. you guys in New York City, you have the benefit, thank goodness for you, that the center of the publishing universe and many television stations and things like that. But I know
Yours here.
No,
I know
it's
you
a
had
blackout.
No, we get no coverage
It's
of
a
local
blackout.
things. They're
Complete
all
blackout.
and they don't cover us.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Not even New York 1 or the 24 hours?
New York
New York one is about the only
Really?
exception.
Sometimes they'll come, I mean, they've been pretty good at being there, but not always. And I think here I get my news directly from Occupy Wall Street. I don't even look at the regular news anymore because whenever I do, it's all lies. Like, I was there and they're saying things that are completely not true or slanted in a certain way. So I don't, there's really no reliable
The thing is, that's gone on for a long time.
Yeah, of course.
But the important thing is that we find ways of getting the word really out, in through whatever means of contact there is, that reaches people who are not in the loop.
Right.
Because continuing to reach the same people in the loop doesn't get us anywhere. It needs to branch out.
Well, didn't that seem to be different? I mean, with Wisconsin, because when I spoke to people, I read this story really. It was more because the story is invariably. Yesterday we saw stories that said what happened at Duarte, but they didn't say what happened at Duarte. They claimed to say what happened. But the difference was that with Wisconsin, it was like, I would say to my friend, I heard about this, and they would say, I heard about it too.
Yeah.
And then it didn't matter what the story said in the newspaper that was inaccurate, because we knew what the truth was. Because one of us had spoken to one of us who had spoken to somebody else who was in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And that was the difference, and it was like...
We have a profound distrust now of the media.
Yeah.
I mean, some of us kind of had that, and now, man, you meet people that they will just get mad and you say, I don't trust a damn thing. I go to my Facebook. Facebook is, I love Twitter, and I can reach you folks, but it's that thing that a lot of people think.
I mean, just a short counter to that. There was this period in probably late February, I think, for about a week, when it was on the top of all the network newscasts. And certainly, that was the point where everybody across the country became aware of it. And then, if they wanted to stay aware of it, they had to seek out the news. And that's the way that of course, the news works. Short attention spans, aside from all the other dynamics and everything. But I mean, I think that did make a difference in Wisconsin. It did make it this very populist movement that other people wanted to copy, and that's why all my Ohio and Arkansas and Olympia, Washington had reverberations of it all.
Speaking of things that can be copied, I think one thing that it's going to be addressed later today, but that not enough people are talking about yet, is how the model of the occupation turning into the recall effort is one that can be further followed in terms of what we're seeing right now of the Occupy momentum and this movement cannot be co-opted, should not be co-opted, but that it can impact the electoral in the same way. So the way we're seeing these people that were so having to take these actions and to occupy and do these amazing things, some of them, and most people in Wisconsin are fully for the recall, they're going door to door, they're doing all these things, while also doing these other actions. And I think that the key with talking about how Occupy is going to impact the elections in 2012 is going to be seen with how these same activists in Wisconsin are able to deal with the recall and how they're taking part in things like Solidarity Sing-Along and the occupations of Paul Ryan's offices and all these other actions, Occupy Madison and Occupy Milwaukee as well. All these things help the electoral effort, it impacts it, even though they're not necessarily specifically designed to go elect Democrats. And I think that's something that not only should be credited there, but it's something that we need to be conscious of, because people on Occupy Wall Street they do not want the movement to be about electing Democrats, because that's not what the movement is. And frankly, the people that were occupying Zuccotti Park, that's not why they were doing that, that's not was their main goal.
Right.
But they do care about what they're doing, impacting the electoral process in terms of any way we can get good things to happen, to get them to happen.
Related to social media, one of the ways that people got fired up about just the process of gathering the signatures is all the anecdotal, wonderful stories that were told. Peter Rickman, who was originally a meteor, the teaching assistant association leader that was based at the Capitol, had something on the other day. He's from Scott Walker's neighborhood in suburban Milwaukee, and he was gathering signatures at the neighbors directly adjacent to Scott Walker. So little things like that can be part of it. But then the other thing is up north, in northern Wisconsin, in places they're traditionally seen as very conservative, very rural, and not necessarily simpatico or something like this. They they were gathering more than 100% of the number of signatures relative to the numbers who voted for Scott Walker.
Is that like how big a factor is the anti-democratic? I don't mean Democrat Party. I'm saying, as in democracy, the anti-democratic thing that Scott Walker is doing, that when they're pushing things through without a vote, how big is that versus, say, labor? You know what I mean? Because are conservatives voting in, well, we want to save labor, or are they voting because they see an abuse of power?
I think it's both. I think it's not necessarily for people that they want to save labor, because certainly for conservatives, unions and labor issues have not always been a rallying cry. But the idea that they want to force these individuals who are public employees to pay extra for all of these things, and they were willing to do that. They were willing to take the pay cuts. They were willing to pay into their pensions. And then our elected officials said, we're still going to go through with these union busting measures because we want to hurt Obama's chances for election, not because that's what's best for Wisconsin. And then the really democratic aspects of this, the crackdowns on free speech, the locking people out of the building, those things, that pushing the bill through in the middle of the night, all of that has really resulted in a feeling that this isn't the Wisconsin way. It doesn't jive with the way that people in Wisconsin feel that politics should go. Even previously under Republican governors, this isn't the way we've done business in Wisconsin. We've always been able to say we disagree, and we may vehemently disagree, but we're going to treat each other with respect while doing it. And that is no longer the case in Wisconsin. And I think people in other states probably read our news, or not the news, but read reports of how upset Wisconsinites were at having to walk through a metal detector to get into our capital and laugh, because that's really par for the course in so many other state capitals. And in our state capital, we've never had metal detectors, not even after September 11th. And it's in our state constitution that that building must be open to the public at all times when the legislature is in session. And those are things that weren't being followed. I mean, our constitutional rights absolutely, in my opinion, were violated by the Walker administration. And those are just part of the fabric of what being a Wisconsinite is. And the attack on that, I think, has made people just feel that even if they don't necessarily agree with the Democratic Party, they are sick of what's happening to Wisconsin politics.
And briefly, they also see a link to what's happening to education. They're PTA members. They may be conservative Republicans, but they want to see the public schools survive, and they see that this is disruptive. They have a relative who's either elderly or on disability, and their health insurance is about to go away. And so these people are making, those folks are making these direct connections with, and I think the message too that this, as much as Walker and the powers that be here are trying to make this sound like it's something that comes from another place or comes from the fringe. The more they say that, I think the more they get discredited, because it's clear that it's Wisconsinites everywhere that feel this way.
I think I just wanted to get out that I think it's evolved. Before, he was at Tea Party rallies. He had his Club for Growth. He had his Americans for Prosperity, the Tea Party. He had Sykes and Milwaukee Talk Radio.
Yeah.
They were calling the high-speed rail the Obama train and the choo-choo train, dismissively. So then it was like a Dems versus GOP Tea Party. And then that kind of morphed quite a bit when we got into the February 11th Wisconsin the so-called budget bill, where it attacked unions explicitly. Then when they got into locking people out of the Capitol, and then it was like, wow, you're going to lock us out. You won't respect the open meetings law. Oh, this is how you're authoritarian as well. Oh, you're going to beat people in the Capitol. Interesting. You know, then you get another layer coming in. And now with this DOA policy, with the 4 people equals a rally and you will pay to protest, now people are like really freaked out. And you do hear stories of people saying, you know, I've always voted Republican. I don't think I can do that anymore. I'm helping you with
To finish the point, I remember when I was saying that in terms of the outsider factor. The Center for Media Democracy, which is another really great institution that's out of Madison, I did an investigative series on the connections to ALEC, this national organization going back into the early 80s that had this national agenda that is directly resonant with what Scott Walker is trying to do, and what a lot of Republican Governor Kasich is trying to do, and everybody else. And I do think a lot of folks are connected with that who might be moderate or conservative. They really resent that the Koch brothers or that the national Republican establishment would have this agenda and try to imprint that in Wisconsin. We're like New Yorkers, we're pretty jealous. We don't want somebody coming in and telling us what to do. So.
I was just going to take on to what Harry was mentioning about electoral process. I'm currently running for office in Wisconsin now, and I'm running for a local county board in Dane County where Madison is located. I live in a smaller city outside of Madison. And I just want to throw that out there as another thing that I think is really something that we should be having come out of these actions across the country, whether it's New York, whether it's Wisconsin, whether it's elsewhere. It doesn't have to be about supporting the Democratic Party, but it can be about finding people who align with our views, who might choose to run as Democrats or might choose to run for a nonpartisan race or whatever. And those are things that our activism can really create and encourage. And so to the extent that there are people who are active here in New York who are really taking leadership roles, to connect them or encourage them to run for office, I think is a great role that we can all play as activists, just when we're talking to each other. There are organizations that are already set up to help do candidate trainings, so to connect those organizations with events that we're having, whether it's in Wisconsin or here, I think that's another good opportunity to try to really encourage that growth and get people on the ground involved instead of just totally ceding the electoral process to people who have money and have the organization. We need to start creating our own.
I need to offer a shout out to someone who I mentioned Appleton, and Appleton Wonk is someone who writes for my blog. My blog is boocheddar.net. Some of the process of this has been Scott Walker trying to characterize the protest as a Dane County thing. Well, it's just Dane County. Through the blog efforts like Appleton Wonk, who's in a conservative area, and like uppity Wisconsin, up in Dunn County, and I'm not going to think of them all. I mean, it's the efforts of these people in Vilas County.
So it's Central Wisconsin organization that's formed.
Yeah,
very conservative towns. Yeah.
Vilas County is at the very top of the state, and there are people gathering signatures at a rapid rate. That's like a real Tea Party hotbed. This is not a Dane County thing. People are getting courage to step forward. We're putting out these efforts. There's people in rural places. And some of these folks, they have to stay anonymous on the web. So I guess I just wanted to honor Appleton Wonk for stepping in there. And she's someone that I met in Madison because she came down in a protest, and I met Paella Cook, who's an advocate from Vilas County. I met, I'm not going to think of, I'll think of everyone later, folks from Wausau area, and folks from Ashland, and folks from over by the cities that I never would have met. And it just takes that one in-the-flesh meeting, and then they go away, and then we stay connected. So that's happened over and over and over again through those weeks of protests across the state. And that is really crucial for us. We're trying to recall force, I'm not going to think of all the names, 4 senators. Senator Scott Fitzgerald being the star of the state. He's the man who looks like a small little league coach that's sort of the Scott Walker mouthpiece through much of this. And someone from Wausau, and someone from Chippewa Falls, and someone, Van Weingart, who Mayor Racine, who did this, unveiled this anti-felon law that lets people discriminate against felons. Back to the authoritarianism. The Dam bill overrides local control, where people in Milwaukee have said we're going to give individuals that have felonies an opportunity to get hired and not to discriminate against. They put the referendum through, and then this person puts a bill through that says, no, state control overrides local. That's been another thing that I'm getting upset and has to go to.
I just want to call your attention to a couple things on the screen real quick. Again, it's Wisconsin stands with New York.blogspot.com, but these are actually programs that I videotaped and put up on Vimeo. It's a group called the Labor and Working Class Studies Project, and it's a fascinating example of coalition. It's community, campus, and labor working together, and these were all hour to 2 hour programs, and your standard talking head panels, but actually pretty fascinating stuff in terms of the analysis of both the media, the social media coverage in the case of the first one, and then the economics of labor, and then next strategic steps to take. So I do encourage you to visit that website. I'd like a question for those of you in New York. As we're talking about our movement being truly statewide or transcending just Madison, Milwaukee, and we're folks from upstate or around the Mid-Atlantic area involved. I mean, I know it's Occupy New York, so maybe not necessarily, but is that an aspect of your coalition building as well? Is there a rural? Jenny, you noted that there was a rural-related workshop this afternoon, right?
Yeah, I think what I said to you is there was like an Occupy Farms section later. But when I was at Occupy Wall Street, there were definitely people that were coming from around the Mid-Atlantic, just in my few days there. But I would think other people who are probably more involved than I am could speak to that better.
Nothing else this morning. Is it just folks in the 5 boroughs, or is it folks in smaller towns and other folks?
I'd like to hear from other people who are more involved with Occupy Wall Street, but Move On has been around for a long time and has a huge internet presence, and so we've organized into councils, on the ground councils. So we have on the ground councils in other parts of New York, and have been supportive of, aside from doing things that we're directly involved in, have been supportive of Occupy Wall Street actions, and have done email blasts getting people to go to those things. So, we here in the city, we organized for the Billionaires March. But we did. We have councils in Albany, in Buffalo, in other parts of Westchester, all over the city, all over the state, rather. But I'd be interested in knowing people, in hearing from people who are more directly involved with Occupy Wall Street, what, if there are presences.
Please respond to that. I guess I was especially curious about Albany. Is that kind of a way that New Yorkers everywhere respond to the state level of this?
There is an Occupy Albany, there's an Occupy Syracuse. In the 5 boroughs, there's Occupy the Bronx, there's Occupy Harlem, there's Occupy Brooklyn, there's Occupy Staten Island. And in terms of people being involved, I don't really know, but I know that there's Occupy cropping up everywhere, and there's a movement toward trying to get a GA that has all the 5 boroughs coming together. So
it's because we ran into this right at the beginning when we started to get involved, because what we saw was, not that we were involved directly at the beginning, but what we saw was that there was going to be an Occupy Brooklyn, because we're both in Brooklyn. And so I had some questions about that as to whether, is this going to double as, when we got Occupy Wall Street, now we have Occupy Brooklyn, do we have to show our nationality, or do we have to show our sense of where we're from or something? But there was something that was important to me about that introduction into the movement, was that my feeling was we needed to go to Wall Street because that's where it was happening, and we were close, right? But there was also a dynamic that was about people needed to organize where they were so that their local interests would be involved, whatever that was, right? And so I think that, my sense is that that's how it works in terms of organizing model right now, is that it's not about, people do come from different locations to New York, but it's if they don't have a local Occupy, right? Because there's Occupy in New Jersey, and there's Occupy on, you know, all around. Occupy on Long Island, Occupy throughout the boroughs, and Occupy upstate. Like,
have other people responded the way that Jenni has in terms of deciding to run for city council or other local offices, or?
I think it's difficult. I mean, I don't know specifically, but I think the issue is like, you know, how do you run if you're going to run as an independent? I mean, if you're not going to run as a Democrat, because there are issues here about, you know, when we see NDAA go through a couple of days ago and Obama says he's going to veto and then he just rescinds it and now they can take you off the street. That's clearly not Occupy. Right. And that's Democrats voted what? They were apologetic about it, but they voted what? 13 voted against.
It was across the board.
The thing is that I mean, I think this touches on a really important issue. You know, I mean, I have my own personal strong feelings about it, but I mean, it's a really important issue, and that is particularly when we're talking at the national level. You know, it seems to me there's no viable way. Viable is the operative word. Of running a third-party candidate and doing anything but ending up with a, you know, from the left and ending up with a Republican in office. And to me, that's you know, we did that once, and we got Bush, and I really think it's important. It's important that as much as everybody is deeply disappointed with Obama and with the Democratic Party. I just think it's really dangerous to, at the national level particularly, think about running third-party candidates. You'll end up with a Republican, and that is worse.
Just a point of information, one of the reasons it's different in Essex County is both our city and county offices are at least officially nonpartisan. So conservative liberals.
That structure makes a big difference. I mean, here we have the working party's family, so one could, you know, the thing is to not. I mean, I think it's so important that we not, you know, sort of vote or stand as a candidate with our conscience and end up with a very obvious outcome, and that is get the opposite.
May I speak?
Yeah.
I think what I love about Occupy Wall Street in particular is that everybody has a different idea. There's a lot of differing views on that, and I won't state my personal opinion, but there are there are some people within the Occupy movement that are Democrats, there are Republicans, there are across the board, whatever you are welcome to come and work towards whatever it is. I personally will never did not vote for Obama and will not vote for Obama. I will vote third party, fourth party, fifth party. I'm hoping that a bunch of people decide to run like you and are inspired and they start their own party, because Obama, it has I can't even go into all the things that he's not a disappointment to me because I didn't vote for him. He has been an utter disaster for the working class, for the poor, for protesters. He's stripped our rights. I can go on and on and on. So,
speaking of that, one thing, I was at a Personal Democracy Media conference earlier this week where Mika Sifri, who runs a blog, the Tech President blog, described how in these movements it's so much easier to have everyone get around to say no to something rather than to say go for something. Like the negative aspect, like we need to go after Wall Street, is very different than saying we all need to get behind a certain candidate. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also where the recall model in Wisconsin is a little different, where we're going to be confronted with it soon, and where people need to be on the same page about how this works. Because it's easy to get people that are third party to say, recall Walker, get rid of this guy, say no to him. But do you get everyone to say, let's say go to certain candidates? Right. Especially with one of the candidates, Dave Obey, it's pro-life. You go tell women who are ardently pro-choice, you have to go suck it up and support a pro-life person. I mean, it's harder to do these things. It's a tougher question, and it's, again, why I think this Walker recall is going to be, it's so important that they do this right to make sure that it can be a model for how we can get people to go, even though this movement started with this just say no mentality. And also, point of process, we are past the time for when the panel is supposed to end by a couple minutes. I do want to invite everyone, though, for after we want to do short video clips that we're going to post online. If anyone wants to send a message to Wisconsin via that way, we'd love to have a video clip of anything you want to provide.
Send an email list around so somehow or another.
Yeah, why don't we? Someone back there, man. One other item. About 20 seconds. Go ahead. Actually, it's right.
Oh, I just wanted to hear more about the recall, and because, well, I think one of the things that's happening at Occupy Wall Street is that like Occupy Wall Street's like the national wing and addressing, and it's not necessarily like a local movement, but there are all these local, now parts of the movement springing up.
Sure.
But we don't have this sort of, I feel like, I don't know, because I'm not totally, right in there, but as a citizen, kind of a little bit, as a participant citizen, like, we don't have that central identity of like, this isn't the Wisconsin way, to sort of bring us together. Anyway.
I just want to shout out to the live stream people that were watching. Thanks for tuning in. We had over 10 actually watching, which is kind of cool. Shout out to Fighting Bob Fest, fightingbobfest.com. They chimed in, and someone else posted, at Blue Cheddar 1, this is so much better than Meet the Press.
So shout out to also to Brad, John, and 3 Nights Media for providing the live stream.
Yeah.
And to John, Carol, Jenny, and from Wisconsin, and for everyone for coming to participate.
By the way, Fighting Bob Fest is a Chautauqua, which is a very New York tradition.